When you think of classic SNK games, games like Mark of the Wolves, King of Fighters 98, and Metal Slug might come to mind, and notice what they all have in common. They're all 2D sprite-based games. All of SNK's games from this time period look fantastic, especially their fighting games for their fluid animation and colourful graphics. However, if you know anything about the state of the games industry in the 90s, you'll know that most, if not all companies were adopting 3D graphics and gameplay into their games as opposed to making yet another 2D game. It didn't take long for Mario, Link, Sonic, Donkey Kong, and many other characters to take the leap into the world of 3D graphics for their next adventure. The fighting game scene was no different, as games like Tekken, Virtua Fighter, and Dead or Alive, among others, were 3D fighters, using polygonal-based character models for their characters instead of using sprites. Hell, even games like Street Fighter were going 3D back in the PS1 days to capitalize on this growing trend, so it's no surprise that SNK tried it out as well. Going back to SNK, let's briefly focus on their Fatal Fury series. Released in 1991, the first game in the series brought us classic characters like Terry Bogard, Joe Higashi, and the coolest fighting game villain, Geese Howard. Over time, more and more games in this series came out before 1994's King of Fighters 94 was released. A crossover between Fatal Fury and SNK's other series, Art of Fighting, KOF 94 was awesome as it combined fan-favorite characters and a 3-on-3 team format to create something unique and fun to play. But no matter how many gameplay innovations were added, one thing remained the same: the graphics. SNK, for better or for worse depending on your opinion, never went 3D with the Fatal Fury series. Until 1999's arcade and PS1 entry into the series, Fatal Fury Wild Ambition. Created as a remake of the first game in the series with more characters and brand new 3D graphics, it was the last game developed for SNK's Hyper Neo Geo 64 arcade board before it was discontinued, although it was released on the PS1 later in 1999 only in North America. Is the game good? Who are the new characters? Why is Geese Howard so based? Let's find out the answers to those questions as we dive into Fatal Fury Wild Ambition.
The winner.
As mentioned before, this is a remake of the first Fatal Fury, and as fighting games from the early 90s didn't have hour-long story modes like they do now, allow me to quickly recap the game's plot to make sure we're all up to speed. In 1981, Terry and Andy Bogard are orphans who are soon adopted by a man named Jeff Bogard, which is nice, but after Jeff is murdered by Geese Howard for no reason other than that he's a dick pimple, they spend the next decade training to get stronger, with their ultimate goal being to take down Geese once and for all. Once their training is over, Geese holds the King of Fighters tournament, a martial arts tournament with a PS5 as a prize. Terry makes it all the way to the final opponent, Geese, and kicks him out of the top of his gigantic tower, ensuring that he plummets to his death. That's it. Compared to other games that have more complex narratives, the simple nature of Fatal Fury's plot is a breath of fresh air. Now that the story is out of the way, let's get into the character roster. The original Fatal Fury only had 3 playable characters, but this game dials it up to 11 by having 14. We have Terry Bogard, the Smash Bros. Character who asks if you're okay, Joe Higashi, the goofy kickboxing champion, Raiden, one of the coolest looking pro wrestlers if you look at him in any other game, because in this game he's blocky as hell, Li Shangfei, a kung fu practitioner who incorporates drunken fist throws into her moveset, Kim Kafwan, the classic SNK taekwondo fighter, Mai Shiranui, the classic fighting game waifu with boobs as big as a Tekken move list, Andy Bogard, younger brother of Terry with a super long hair, Duck King, a fighter who uses dance moves during his fights, Ryuji Yamazaki, the sadistic gangster with the power to stretch his arms Dalsim style, Tsugumi Sendo, a new character to the series who uses wrestling, Geese Howard, the primary antagonist who speaks in beautiful broken English, Toji Sakata, another new character who uses a fighting style I'm not even going to try to pronounce, Billy Kane, Geese's right-hand man who uses a Rolento pole as a weapon, and finally, Mr. Karate, who is actually an older version of Ryo Sakazaki. This is a balanced character roster, featuring both returning and original characters with brand new 3D character models and their classic moves. If you love throwing out Repukens with Geese in other SNK games, or maybe even in Tekken, then you'll be able to do exactly that in Wild Ambition. Now that we've covered the story and character roster, let's get into how the game actually plays. Once you've chosen your character and gotten into a match, you'll find that even though this looks like a 3D game, it plays more like a 2D fighter, except for one feature. By pressing up or down and triangle at the same time, you can do a dodge roll into the background or foreground to try and escape your opponent's pressure, but you can be punished if you use this at the wrong time as it has lots of recovery. All characters have access to this dodge roll, as well as basic gameplay features like a weak punch, weak kick, and a strong attack. You can chain these moves together for a short combo that does pretty good damage, all things considered. Other mechanics in Wild Ambition include special moves, like Power Wave, Reppuken, Poison Mist, etc., and superpower attacks, which can only be used when your life bar is flashing red, and they don't require meter. Perhaps the most important gameplay feature is the heat meter. Appearing half full at the start of every match, it fills when you attack your opponent and decreases when you take damage. When it's full, you'll get a message reading max OK, letting you know that it's time to use your Heat Blow, an unblockable attack that either stuns or knocks the opponent into the air on hit, or you can use your Overdrive attack, which is your major super move. With all these features, Fatal Fury Wild Ambition feels more like a 3D version of Real Bout Fatal Fury 2 rather than a remake of the first game. All these mechanics are great to have, but unfortunately the actual gameplay is quite sluggish and unresponsive. I don't know how many times I tried to input a special move and got nothing because of how unresponsive the controls are at times. This game doesn't feel great to play due to the lethargic controls plaguing its matches. When compared to the gameplay of Tekken, this game gets destroyed. Another aspect of Wild Ambition that dooms it to mediocrity is the lack of interesting modes. We have Arcade Mode, which opens with a 6.5 minute FMV with some of the lowest video quality I've ever seen in a pre-rendered cutscene. After this, we get to the fights, which aren't anything special or original. You beat the opponent, fight the next one, and then repeat until you make it to Geese Howard, the final boss. Speaking of Geese Howard, he, like other SNK boss fights, is incredibly hard to beat. Big damage combos? Check. Input reading? Check. This guy has it all, and it makes it very frustrating to beat him. Seriously, look how long I had to play for before I actually managed to defeat him. After you beat Geese, you finish Arcade Mode and watch the ending cutscene, and that's it. After this, you can try out Versus Mode, the standard versus match option found in every other fighting game, Training Mode, Team Battle Mode, which is ripped directly from Tekken, and finally, Data Mode, which lets you look at artwork for every character and their special move commands. That's it. That's all of the content that Fatal Fury Wild Ambition has to offer. If you're expecting something like Tekken Force or the quest mode in Turbo No. 1, you're out of luck. This game is a straight port of the arcade version with very minimal content added. But hey, you're currently hearing the opinion of a fighting game zoomer who sniffs glue and who thinks Guilty Gear Strive is one of the worst fighting games ever made, so obviously I don't have any credentials. So, let's take a look at how critics at the time viewed the game. Maybe they saw something in the game that I didn't see. No, they hated the game. The review that stood out to me was from Famitsu, a Japanese gaming magazine. A trend I've noticed over time is that if there's a game that Western critics don't like that much, Famitsu usually gives it a positive review. Killer is Dead? Western critics said it was mediocre, but Famitsu gave it a 35 out of 40. JoJo All-Star Battle? Even though JoJo is awesome, it received mixed reviews over here in the West, but Famitsu gave it a perfect 40 out of 40, making it 1 out of the 27 games they've given the score. I think this is due to the cultural differences between the West and the East and their expectations for certain games. Perhaps the Japanese are more forgiving of flaws? I don't know for sure, but what I do know is that Fatal Fury Wild Ambition received a 25 out of 40 from Famitsu. If your game is from Japan and even Famitsu doesn't give it a great score, it's pretty much over for you in terms of getting good reviews. Exaggerations aside, the point is that no one liked this game when it was released. Review aggregator website GameRankings.com reports that the game's average review score is a 5 out of 10. There are some very poor reviews here, like PlayStation Official Magazine's 1.5 out of 5 score. If you think I'm cherry picking bad reviews, check out the website and look for yourself. It's mainly all negative. It wasn't all bad, however, as Japan's arcade game-focused magazine Game Machine reported in their March 15, 1999 issue that Wild Ambition was the third most successful arcade game of the month. Not bad. I made this video to learn about an obscure 3D fighting game from one of my favorite fighting game developers. As mentioned in the intro of the video, I didn't even know that this game existed, so I wanted to understand what this game was and how it played through the video making process. Overall, if you like weirder, obscure games from decades ago like I do, try this game out and see if you like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Fatal Fury, Wild Ambition.